Welcome to Humility Day. We're so humbled that you're here.
Bad one.
That was funny. Anyway. Humility. It's probably kind of obvious that we need humility in our marriage and in our relationship. It's really one of the things I think that's most difficult as a human being. We wake up in the morning thinking about our needs. It's a natural thing. There's nothing wrong with that, thinking about our needs. But humility requires we change that posture. And it requires that we lean on something bigger than ourselves, our relationship with God. And He's our inspiration. And that's why the Bible asks us to take up our cross daily. There's this aspect of starting our day with God, understanding what He's calling us to do that day. And one of those things is to approach our wives and approach our husbands in humility. So one of the great things about the posture of humility is it protects us from judgment and scorekeeping. And scorekeeping is a really common problem in relationships. And I sometimes, regardless of how much we know and how much we love each other, we find ourselves reverting back to that kind of,
I did the laundry, so.
Yeah, that kind of stuff when we're keeping score. Like, I did this, but you didn't do that. I bought you flowers, but you didn't,
Take out the trash.
Take out the trash. She's a great trash taker outer. Yeah. No, I do that. We'll get into gender roles later, but humility is a thing, and scorekeeping I call it the weed seeds in a relationship. Once you start keeping track, it's not a 50-50 thing. That's the world's offering to you. 50-50. Good luck keeping track of that. You're never going to get it right. You're setting yourself up to fail. Humility, which pivots that. It switches things around. It flips it on its head to say, I am going to approach you humbly. I'm not keeping score. That's incredibly powerful in a marriage. All right. So why is humility so difficult? The Bible says in 1 Corinthians 7:28, those who marry will face many troubles in this life. And so that's kind of sad.
Yeah.
But it's true. It seems sad, but we know it's true. We've seen it in other marriages. We've seen it in other relationships. Look, it's difficult, but humility, it's the opposite of selfishness. So our natural posture of humility is the same one that allows us to connect with God. So humility, or the lack thereof, in our relationship, just to give you a personal story, because after we went through the training, we haven't made any mistakes since.
No, perfect.
Perfect. No, that's not true. So actually our most recent argument, I woke up feeling selfish, and I was keeping score, and I came to Pamela and talked to her about some, particular need, and not in the right way. How did that make you feel?
Well, first of all, it's in the way that you talk about it. If you're coming from a humble spot, it's not like blame, or it doesn't put me on the defense. But in this particular morning, I was approached because you were tired, and I was a little bit on the defense. So we were putting to skills everything that we've learned. Yeah. So I realized pretty quickly, almost as the minute the words left my mouth, I'm like, wait, something's wrong here. Something's wrong. And and then her reaction confirmed that I was not on the right track. And so that led me to kind of reflect, and I needed to go back to God and say, where's my heart at? And it was not. I was in a selfish mode. I wasn't in a humble state. And I was able to reflect and kind of come back and say, hey, I'm sorry. I didn't approach this the right way. Now, that being said, having needs and communicating those to your spouse, that is healthy and normal and encouraged. And sometimes that's the problem people have, is like, I can't communicate my needs because I don't know how to do it, or I feel self-conscious, or I'm worried about being let down. And sometimes if I'm on the defensive, I'm not going to be able to hear your needs. So it makes it even a double whammy.
Great point. Yeah. So this kind of dovetails into communication and how we speak and what we can hear. And humility really sets that tone to allow us to speak and to be heard.
Yeah, because sometimes I might need humility of my own to not be defensive.
So what does a marriage with a humility problem look like? It looks a little bit like our example, right? And so a marriage with a humility problem, and what's the opposite of humility would be selfishness or pride. That doesn't mean it has to define your marriage. That's a moment in time. And we want to be careful not to say, oh, we have this problem, and that's what our marriage is now. We want to isolate, identify, and react and troubleshoot that specific incident, and then learn from it and move on. So grace abounds. God gives us grace. We come humbly. He's always faithful to forgive us. We need to have that same posture with our spouses. We're going to make mistakes. We're imperfect people. And so if we think about the correlation of our marriage and that humility with God, there's a very obvious tie, right? So that's, again, we've talked about this many times. We're going to talk about it more. So sorry if you get sick of it, but our relationship with each other, with our spouse, is very much a relationship with God. And God, the Bible talks about that repeatedly. It calls the church its bride, right? And so again, it's beautiful. It's fun when you can look at your marriage in that way and realize that there's something bigger to it. Yes, that's a relation with us. God's using it to refine us, to make us more like him. He's using it to touch other people in our lives. And that it's a parallel to God and the church is super, super beautiful thing. And so again, as our relationship is this parallel to God and the church, he also gives us the most amazing examples of humility. And Jesus is the prime example. He humbled himself, took our sin, and was a sacrifice for us. And so now we're going to have Pamela wash my feet and show you humility. No, we're not going to do that. But that is an example. And we're not going to make that your activity either. You're not going to have to wash your spouse's feet. If you want to, that's cool. No judgment. But we do have a fun exercise for you. So let's get to it. And we hope that your understanding of humility, that you'll embrace it and that you'll be aware of it for the rest of your marriage, and that you'll lean into humility and seek God first, love your spouse, and things will go well.